Hello, good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining. This is the final roundup of the year, which seems kind of shocking to actually even be saying that. I'm not sure quite where 2021 has gone, to be honest. So thank you so much for joining. We had record numbers registered for this one, so it means a great deal to Luan and I, so thank you very much. And yeah, good morning, Jake. Thanks for lighting up the chat already. Hi, Karen. Yeah, let's light up the chat, and like always, because there's going to be some really interesting stuff, certainly around like organic and paid benchmarks as well, which might be contra to some people's strategies. So it'd be great to kind of get some discussion going, because some of the data we're going to show might get you thinking a different way, or you might disagree with, which would be really interesting to have. We're social media professionals on this call, so nice to have a bit of debate and some extra context. Anyway, that's a lot of waffle from me. Good morning, Luan.
Good morning, Andy. And yeah, it does feel a bit strange to say this is our last one of the year, but some people are commenting, yeah, it's been a long one, hasn't it? And and my geeky self, because I know that we both love talking about data, I had a look at how many social media updates I'd shared across my newsletter and websites this year, and today it's 622 across 6 platforms. And that is, as we only do on these sessions, that's the stuff that is being confirmed and talked about. That's not all the stuff that people spot or talk about being in testing. So of all the new stuff that you and I read every week, there's been over 600 changes this year. And we spoke just before we joined the session that last session we were kind of, what's going to happen? And there was a big announcement 2 hours after we'd finished about Meta, which we'll come on to. But we also said, apologies if there's anyone in the US that if you're interrupting your Thanksgiving to join us, thank you. If not, you may be watching on replay, but we're not expecting any big announcements today because it is Thanksgiving.
Yeah, exactly that. So, well, lots of people joining in. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah, massively appreciated. So, as we always do, same format. If you're new to this session, go through it as usual, which is we'll start with the trends, the big macro trends. We'll talk through any data that we've discovered that's interested us over the last month, some discoveries, some things like that can inform our social strategies. And then we're going to go through every major update that you need to know across each individual platform. And we're not talking about all of the tests and experiments here. We're talking about the stuff that you can do something with and take action with. But I say the same thing every single month, and I'll say it again for the last time this year, which is don't feel that you need to do everything that's shown here. Don't feel that like the pressure or the FOMO of like, I need to do that. I need to be over here. Honestly, doing a few things well is always better than doing lots of things subpar. So yeah, just use this session as a way of getting some inspirations and context as to what's happening to inform your strategies moving forward. So firstly, if anyone doesn't know Luan already, do you mind doing a quick intro before we dive in?
Yeah, sure. I'm based in the Cotswolds in the UK. I can see some people from Gloucestershire, so hello, those two outside. I'm a marketing consultant. I've been a marketer for 20 years, working in agencies, client side, and running my own business. And I have a wonderful day-to-day mix of working directly with clients, supporting them with their marketing activity, their social media plans, and implementation. That's from manufacturers, law firms, universities, agencies as well, through to I also get to teach and train. And actually Andy and I have both got a record number of events today. This is just one of the ones that we're both doing today. I teach and train in-house and on behalf of LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram and Google as well.
Love that. Wonderful intro. And I'm Andy. I'm one of the founders of ContentCal. This is what it looks like, but most of you probably know that. So with that, let's start with the trends, 2 macro trends, and then we're going to go into some more kind of detailed stuff, which us nerds really like. So Gen Z social platform usage. Saw this report come out. This was about 3 days ago. And this shows the trend of Gen Z, which is 12 to 17-year-olds, their adoption of social platforms, where you can see, in 2019, TikTok didn't register, and it's clear to see the growth of TikTok. And in complete polar opposite, the decline of Instagram. Doesn't mean that Instagram's going away anytime soon. And for most of us, we're probably not targeting 12 to 17-year-olds, but it does give us a really interesting insight as to what the future of the platforms look like. Because if you recall from last month, where from the Facebook files reports, all that leaked data from Facebook showed that there's a mass exodus from younger users from Facebook and also by extension Instagram. So that's the way I take this. I take this as a really interesting perspective on where social platforms will be going and where the kind of growth will be coming from. So I don't know if you look at this in any different way, Luan.
I was interested that this starts at age 12 because I think the starting age for some of the platforms being able to set up an account is 13. Any of us that have younger people in our households know that they all have accounts before this time, and their ages may not always be their true age. So I'm sure there's a bit of skewing in this data. We have shared some data before from UCAS Media around this Gen Z audience, but I think there's a couple of things here. There's one around, we may not all be targeting this audience, but remember, particularly in B2B, there is a whole mixture of generations in our decision-making unit, our influencers who's gathering the information for the people that are holding the purse strings and going to be using this product. So they are important in this mix, even if we think that they're not our end customers. But also, I think there's something really interesting around the platforms they're using, and if we look at the nature of the content on the platforms, that also gives us a bigger steer, because these are really visual platforms. They are the video platforms, they're the bite-sized content platforms, which are slightly different to how we're seeing content that's working on perhaps Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. So I think there's signals. We always want to cut this up and look behind the scenes, but I think we absolutely need to be, as Andy said at the beginning, this is not to strike fear in everyone of you've got to do all this new stuff that we're talking about all the time, but it's about almost having our feet grounded in firm plans right now, but always one eye on the future and what's happening and what could be coming next. And we're seeing that coming through in some of the prediction articles. Brilliant ContentCal blog about predictions coming through, some other trend stuff happening. We've definitely got to have that one eye on the future. And also what I found interesting on here was that TikTok isn't in 2019, and just what a massive difference that's made in the last 2 years. We can't ignore it any longer.
Totally agree with that. And something else that we can't ignore, should we be in a consumer-based business, then this is just staggering what's happening here. I mean, it's underpinning. We talk about it every month anyway, so I won't dwell on this too much. But it's really this data that's underpinning the decisions from so many social media platforms, and so many updates you're going to see today is all focused on this, because we've spoken about the Chinese live stream e-commerce economy, which is about $480 billion now. And typically, like any trend that we see in the world of social, it starts east and then heads west. So, and that's what we're seeing happening with the social commerce space. So you can see the charts going up and up. But fundamentally, if you're in a consumer-based business, 2022 is going to start to afford a lot of opportunity through social. So I'm really excited about this as an opportunity.
Right, it's one of those ones where we're not always our own target audience, but we can always have two heads on, can't we, when we're looking at this data as well and thinking about our own habits and our own behaviors as well. And we're in the shopping period for the year, and we're so heavily influenced by social media anyway. That's always been in the stats, but now we can actually click and convert through social media as well. It's going to be huge. Absolutely.
So they're your kind of big macro trends that are shaping the direction and the future of social really at the moment. But let's look at some organic trends. So let's take it back down to really tactical, more kind of nerdy stuff, let's call it. So the gap between Facebook and Instagram. So this is about engagement, and this data is from another source, because we shared something very similar to this last month, but this is across about 250,000 accounts, so very statistically significant. And really what it can reiterate is there's a big gap between the engagement that you're likely to get on Facebook and Instagram, and that gap's about 6 times. So 6 times more likely to generate engagement on Instagram rather than Facebook. Probably the least surprising news story you've ever heard. But the thing to be slightly wary of, and we're going to cover this more as we go through this session, is that if you look at the 2020 to 2021 statistics, they're worryingly down, basically. So that's talking about year over year, what's our engagement rate looking like? How many people can we possibly reach? We always talk about the decline of organic reach, And we're seeing that happen in front of our eyes, not just on Facebook, we're seeing it happen on Instagram for a myriad of reasons, lots of different content formats, lots of competition for the feed, etc. It's not all doom and gloom, because we're going to talk about other ways to think about it, but it just helps you think going into 2022, when you're looking at your content strategy, if it's entirely Instagram focused, it's probably prudent to think or experiment with other channels as well. We've got some more data about Instagram coming up, but before I move on, Luan, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think for me, this is about thinking about engagement overall, and that it needs to be a focus. You know, I see all too often that there's a real focus on posting content, writing content, posting content, job done. You know, what makes a great social media post? What helps you achieve objectives, whether it's reach, engagement, conversion? Engagement is what we're looking for. So I find these stats absolutely fascinating because of the size of the gap between the two platforms. But I think it's also reminding us that we need to encourage engagement. You know, we need to be asking questions. We need to be asking people to comment, to tagging their friends, perhaps running competitions, and really make sure that it's something we remember. You know, I've written this great social media post. Have I told people what I want them to do as a result of reading it? So, you know, look at your own data, look at your own benchmarks, compare your own performance on the different platforms, but the need to focus on getting engagement to achieve, you know, as part of your bigger plan is what comes through on these kind of stats for me.
I'm with you, and sticking with engagement, but flipping onto Facebook, right? Because we always know, like, organic engagement reach on Facebook is always diminishing, as it is on most platforms for reasons that we all know. But if you look at the performance of different post types on Facebook, this reiterates in this latest data something that we saw in a previous month's roundup, is when we're looking at the different types of content format, which are the ones that generate the most engagement, of which live video is still coming out. So live streaming on Facebook, absolutely winning out, even though it's slightly diminished on 2020 statistics, which are down across everything other than other. Quite curious. I want some of that, but anyway. But the other thing to take away is, you know, like we've reiterated numerous times, is that photo posts, so single image posts or multi-image posts as well, perform better than videos, and certainly better than link posts as well. So it's definitely worthwhile bearing in mind the different post formats. And when you're thinking about your strategy, you're thinking about how am I going to generate additional reach and engagement, like Luan was talking about, thinking about the different formats of your posts and being cognizant of the ones that are driving the most amount of engagement is what I take from this. And it's also interesting to see there's a diminishing amount of pages that are going live on Facebook, despite the fact that it is the format that generates the most interaction and engagement. So it sounds like, or it seems like, you know, strategy is probably not entirely in alignment with the trends of where platforms are headed. Yeah. And sticking with that engagement piece as well, because there's other data from Social Insider as well, because it's nice to look at it from multiple different angles with lots of different people looking at data as well, to give us a bit of a balanced look. But here, this kind of reiterates the amount of engagement via type of post. So here it's kind of calling out carousel posts on Facebook are the ones that generate the most engagement, and the rest of it kind of follows suit with that previous data. But the key thing here on this insight is that, well, it basically just proves that what we already know. You know, adding a link on your post, if you can avoid it, it's probably best to avoid it. Unfortunately, most of us want to try and send people to somewhere, but here it's halving our engagement rate when we're including a link, which is quite painful to see laid out like this. So yeah, Luan, what do you reckon?
It is painful to see it laid out, and I think, and you know, I think this is the one that always gets me in terms of, you know, links. Should we do it? Should we not do it? Yes, we're striving for engagement, but, you know, we have objectives. And for example, you know, we both post in Facebook groups, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, that we want people to come to webinars. So we need to include a link to get people to make that happen. We can't avoid including a link. So I think for me, it's always thinking about the objective of your post. What do you want people to do? Focusing on your audience and making things easy for them. Don't hide the link. There's nothing worse than seeing a post about an event and then going, well, I don't know what day it is. I don't know how to register. I don't know where, you know, you've made things too difficult for me. So there is a balance. This really distresses me in terms of, you know, just how different it is. I think the point is, if you don't need to include, don't, or perhaps the fact that now we have so many character counts, allowance on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, that we actually put more of the content into the post rather than, you know, the first two lines and then go off to my website, that we actually kind of embrace the content being on these platforms and not always a click through to a post. But if we need a link because it's an event or a webinar or a download, we don't make it difficult.
Exactly. I mean, I'm one for always popping it in the comments as well, but it's suboptimal because someone's going to have still root in the comments. But there's ways around it, but it's the harsh reality of the situation. And let's flip onto Instagram really, because that's some interesting insight around Facebook engagement. But let's look at Instagram a little bit. So the two dynamics of this data that you can see in front of you that I'm hovering over here is the amount of posts that are published across certain formats by certain brands, right? So image is still the one that's published the majority of time, then carousel, then video. Interestingly, carousels overtaken video, which is good to see because we know that carousels generate more engagement than single image posts, which is good. And if you look at the performance of the different types of posts, carousel absolutely winning out. You'll see it's kind of fairly balanced, but also video, as we saw on Facebook, video posts in the feed not performing as well as they could do. Probably not worth the overall investment that it takes in creating video. If you feel like you just need to create video to be on social, it's not the case. But it does help us understand really where we should be focusing from a content format perspective if we want to generate the most engagement. And then talking about generating engagement as well, generating reach, I want to look at it from another dimension. We looked at post formats, but now let's look at stories in particular. So once again, this was a report that was only issued yesterday, so just in time to include today. It was the amount of the story performance. So firstly, the average number of stories per month per profile size, which is quite interesting to see the amount of stories, like brands with over 100,000 followers doing 50 stories a month. That sounds like quite a lot to me. But the interesting thing to think about, however, is if you look at the reach rate, and what reach rate relates to is as a percentage of your followers, how many people are seeing your content. So if you had 100 followers and 50 saw them, or 50 saw your post, that's a 50% reach rate. But that reach rate is approximately half of a story versus a post. So while story is great for depth of engagement, potentially not the best if you're trying to generate reach across your followers, because typically you're going to see double the amount of reach from your feed versus a story. And I'm not too sure whether I was just in the dark about this, or I've never seen data presented in this way. I found this quite surprising, actually. So I'm interested in your take on this, Luan.
Yeah, you know, we love the data and seeing what's happening. I think I've got a couple of comments. I think stories are a great format because, you know, if I open my app, you know, they're right front and center and I see them, and, you know, I enjoy story content. There's some changes that are coming up that could impact this. And that is, I think I've read the past couple of days that stories can now be longer. They can be 60 seconds, which means that they're not going to get cut up, which could be better. It's obviously going to change the reporting.
Definitely.
But something when you were talking about, you know, the size of account and level of content, I work with a client where we have a fairly large audience. It's a consumer goods product. And actually most of our stories, you know, the majority of our stories are all user generated content. It's when we get tagged, we reshare them, we show people using the products, getting involved in the products, competition. So it could be that, you know, the larger accounts have more content because they have user generated style as well. And actually it's about community then as well. So I think it's about the format and trying and testing. But we also, you know, we have a balance on this account because we have a balance between wanting to reshare people's stories because, you know, that user loves it when their brand shares the story versus, you know, are you doing too many? Are people switching off? Are they not? So my answer to all of these slides is actually you've got to test, you've got to learn, you've got to review, you've got to look at your own data to see what kind of observations come out of it.
Exactly. And, you know, and it's also nice to look at it in this way to feel like you don't feel like you need to be pressured into doing some things. If you're not running stories today, then, you know, you don't necessarily need to do it. Now, talking about reach rate as well, number of hashtags. Now, wow, this is a contentious thing, isn't it?
We could be rich on this question, couldn't we?
Oh, we could. But like, you know, I shared some data. What was that? Maybe 2 months ago. Across 250,000 odd Instagram accounts, where it was determined that the average number of hashtags that were included in those brands posts that got the most reach was 7. And then we see some data here from our friends over at Later, 18 million accounts they've analyzed. And, they're saying 20 hashtags per post is the one that will generate the biggest reach rate, which is, what do we try and glean from that? I think it's more down to Luan, your testing. And I wanted to share this, even though, it's counter to what we've spoken about before, but it really just helps us think more broadly and encourage the fact there is, unfortunately, like it or not, there are no hard and fast rules in the world of social. I wish that everyone wishes there were some guidelines to work to. Sadly, there are not. So, well, the answer is somewhere between 7 and 20. So that you should include in a post. But there you go. I don't know if you have any other take on this.
If there was a golden answer, wouldn't it be wonderful? But then it wouldn't keep us on our toes as much as it does. I think for me, hashtags, it's about, again, you're right. A big fan of testing, but it's also about the stage that your account is at. If you're a new account on Instagram, or your objective is to build and build fast, you may be using more hashtags to reach more people. You may be mixing them up. I can imagine every retailer is now including hashtag Black Friday. In the next few weeks, it's hashtag Christmas. Christmas is coming. Christmas gifts, Christmas ideas. It's about mixing them up as well. It's not just like trying to find the holy grail of 7 and using them. But I've also been to talks and conferences over the last few years where actually, really well-established accounts don't need the hashtags as such. I think National Geographic and New York Times have their own style guide of not using more than 5. It's an aesthetic thing more than anything else. They've got the audience. But you know what? If I was starting an account off now, I'd be going for as many as I possibly could, looking at the data and then refining and pulling back at a later stage. So it's never going to be one-off answer. There's always a it depends and XYZ.
Absolutely. But this is the end of the organics benchmark stuff. So I'm going to go into paid now for the next 3 or so minutes. But I think the takeaways really from this is, look at the different content formats that are performing well on Instagram and Facebook, because clearly they're very different formats that work well. Experimenting with the use of hashtags as well as a key one, thinking about the balance of stories versus feed posts. So there's some really interesting takeaways there we can use to inform our strategies moving forward. So we're going to fly through some paid stuff as well, because we want to get into the mix of all of the changes that are happening as well. Ad spend is up year over year, 43%. Lots of people spending money on ads fundamentally. So we'll always expect to see a big spike in Q3, but even when we're comparing Q3 to Q3 last year, it's up. And that's despite all of the debacle that's happened with the iOS updates, which I'll cover in a second. But all of that growth is coming at a cost as well. So cost per click for Facebook and Insta ads saw a bit of a correction in January, but we'd expect to see that as a post kind of Christmas lull as it builds again. And of course, that cost will have been increased by the reduction in targeting opportunities as a result of the whole iOS update thing. Click-through rate has marginal decline, but it's still fairly consistent. So lots more spend happening. It's getting more expensive, but performance is fairly flat. But obviously still a massive opportunity. But let's go into that in a second. But Apple costs social platforms $10 billion. This is interesting. No wonder Facebook and Apple are in such a massive tug of war at the moment. So the iOS 14, I think it was, update, which mandated the fact that someone's got to opt in to being tracked. Naturally, I think the latest data was somewhere between 4 and 7% of people said, yeah, I want to be tracked. Not too sure of who those people are. I think most people sensible go, no thanks. But anyway, with that's clearly had some net negative impacts on targeting. Clearly, that's probably played out in the data that we've just seen, which is declining click-through. But of course, as we enter Q4 anyway, the competition is fierce from a paid perspective anyway. So we'd expect to see an increase in cost, but a not corresponding increase in click-throughs. And talking about click-throughs, actually, and I'll kind of invite your thoughts on this as well, Luan, is that, if we look at the platform position and the kind of ad formats that we're sending, so Facebook feed, highest cost per click, but has the corresponding highest click-through rate, which is fine. But then the rest of this data then inverts on itself, which is quite interesting. So this is a mix between Facebook and Insta, as you can see. Instagram feed is the one that gets the second highest share of a budget, but actually has the lowest click-through rate. Now, the objective might not be about click-through, it just might be about, brand awareness, for example. But that's a lot of spend to put in brand awareness. So certainly, like we've seen with some kind of Facebook strategies, when we're looking in the organic performance, where we see declining usage of live streaming, yet that's the content format generates the biggest engagement. We're seeing a kind of mismatch here between where strategies are headed versus where performance is coming from. So yeah, that's my take on that one, Luan. So what do you think?
Yeah, this, I'm not surprised that ad spend is increasing. It's shifting from other channels and it's increasing on this platform. And I think one of the predictions for next year is that, there's going to be more spend shifted to TikTok as well, whether that's away from Facebook and Instagram or whether it's an addition. We're not going to see this spend drop. It is about looking at your organic content and see what performs well. And if it performs well, then, that's where you put your money behind. But I do also see that sometimes there's a challenge between going, this works well on organic, but it's not really created as an ad. When your targeting may be that it's not to your existing followers, that it's to lookalike audiences or custom audiences, you need to think about their situation. Do they know about the brand? Do they not know about the brand? Lots of areas to think about. And, the advertising does need some clear direction and thinking process behind. There's some interesting ways that you could start off with automated placements, let Facebook do its work, and then look at the data to see which positions, which formats work best for your budget. I think for me, there's such a huge difference between what goes on in the feed, what goes on in stories. And again, it could come down to, has the creative been adapted to be in that format and work well to get the click-throughs as well? So don't dismiss how scientific or much planning needs to go in ads. It's not just about clicking button and self-serving. There's a lot of money that goes into this and it needs to be really focused, but it does clearly get results as well.
Very, very sensible advice. And the final thing on some data before we go into the platform specific stuff. So usually we say TikTok's winning everything, but it loses to Reels when you look at the advertising side of things. And this is, to be fair, this is a very narrow perspective of the world. This is based on someone who put $1,000 on each and basically targeted the same demographics and let the ads mechanisms on both platforms run their course. But interesting to see Insta Reels clearly pushing very heavily and providing some really generous reach and impressions. So if we think about our ad strategy, we're thinking about being scientific. In that previous chart, we didn't even feature Instagram Reels because it doesn't even feature as a dot on click-through rates or where any budget's going. So definitely this is an opportunity, and this is where advertising is really good on social, an opportunity for experimentation because it doesn't require massive budgets to test and get some really valuable learnings from it. So so some interesting things to think about in your experimentation as you go into next year. Luan, what's new?
What's new? A new logo. Yeah, as we said, we knew that Facebook were going to announce a new name, and they did it about 2 hours after our last monthly update. And the thing about, these, forgive us, US companies, they do it during our evening, don't they, in the UK? So what did we all do? We all had to start talking about it and start sharing about it. Meta is the new name not the new name for Facebook. The name of the apps is not changing. They are still Facebook. They are still Instagram and WhatsApp and Messenger. It's their company name. Meta, because we know that Zuckerberg's focus is going to be on the metaverse and, everything going forward. And he's sharing some really interesting content on his own platform about how he's experimenting with his avatars, with his augmented reality and everything else. So I think I've said it before, follow Mark Zuckerberg on Facebook because he's sharing what he's up to and what his thinking is. I think we can expect some changes that come with this changing company structure. Not a big one, I guess, comes back to all their data issues and conversations they have. They're shutting down facial recognition.
Yeah, I think that's more of a kind of PR, really, isn't it? But
it's kind of like, oh, okay, And sometimes when they talk about shutting things down, we're not always aware of them in the first place. They just announce it afterwards. So I think that was a PR exercise. The other changes to Facebook, some of them very similar, so we can really run through some of these slides. We've talked about creators as a term, as we've said, kind of feels like we're professionalizing creators in the world of social media, and monetization has been a huge element that we've seen across platforms this year in 2021. Facebook's announcement again comes back to that Apple argument, isn't it, that they're not going to take any commission for things and give all the money to the creators. These platforms are encouraging creators with money to keep them on the platforms, to keep creating great, amazing, inspiring, educational, entertaining content, to get all the rest of us all to go back and to keep returning to these platforms. So a clever move by them, but great to have recognition that content creation is important too.
Lots of group stuff.
Lots of group stuff. And we've also talked about, Facebook have had a real focus on groups, and for many it's been a key reason to keep going back to Facebook. Don't know about you, my friends and family aren't posting anywhere near as much content on Facebook anymore, whether we're tired of it or we just don't do anything anymore. So my biggest reason to go on Facebook is to go into groups, whether that's peer-to-peer groups, whether it's local community groups, whether it's hobby groups, see what's happening. And groups can become really valuable places. You don't need to own a group. You can actively participate in other groups, let the owners do the work. But there's some great features in there for these group owners in the way that they can facilitate and work with it. So lots more customization in the groups for the owner. They can give awards to their group members for, what's this one? Insightful, uplifting, informative, relevant, fun, positive vibes. So it's a way for the group owner to kind of engage their members and keep those active people coming back as well. Subgroups, I like this idea. Some groups are huge. Some groups have very broad topics, especially social media groups have very broad topics. To be able to have subgroups, if you wanted, for example, by platform, by trends, by events, by topics. Again, I think sometimes, I don't say this so much on Facebook, but people do have a tendency to try and set up new accounts, new groups for things all the time. Whereas if you can keep that subgroup under a heading and a community, I think that's a positive move for group owners and group members as well. Allowing them to monetize the subgroup, because yes, it could be around an event or a purpose or something, that is another good feature, something to consider if you have a group and planning for 2022. They're getting chats, they're getting reoccurring events. I know that maybe it goes back to that kind of live video, maybe it's dropped off. If we can make it easier for group owners to set their monthly lives, their weekly lives up and engage people in it, another great feature. Long form content. This might come back to that not sending people away into links and to elsewhere, is actually really trying to create these groups as almost a blogging platform. I found someone last night on Facebook that was using her account as a real, a blog of what she's doing day to day, where she is, how she, behind the scenes of her business. So I really got engaged with that longer form content, not just here's a picture, here's a tag. So maybe it fits with that whole kind of newsletter, longer form conversations going forward. One to watch, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited about this, an opportunity.
Yeah. And shopping. Shopping was announced in groups. Who'd have thought it? Probably not a surprise. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't looked for it. But I think using groups to find products and make purchases as well is a great move. If you have an online store or want to create a community around your products, your services, what you do, and then to be able to actually make it easy to buy through that group, great step. Oh, these are just different screenshots with different examples, aren't they?
So these ones, so you can now ask for product recommendations within groups as well. So all of those different products that get highlighted. So this is, in this example, is like a skincare group whereby people can recommend certain products, of which then can be linked out to certain shops, etc. So it really helps. I mean, that's how so many people are discovering products and services. So much happens within a Facebook group, in terms of understanding influence from peers, what products are good, etc. And that's a really fantastic way for businesses to generate word of mouth, generate advocacy through those groups, and now those product recommendations feed into that shopping thing you just mentioned as well, Luan. And of course, live streaming, as you've already mentioned, live streaming, e-commerce, ad infinitum.
Yeah. This is we see this from time to time, don't we? Sharing from Facebook to Instagram, Instagram back to Facebook. I think Facebook were often reluctant to do this, even though it's between their own platforms, and sometimes they've allowed it one way and sometimes the other. But it seems that we can just keep doing more of it, and it's facilitating that. So you now can share your Facebook feed post to Instagram. That brings a whole another level of conversation that we've had in the past around, posting the same thing across every platform, or do you need to change the nuance of it for the platform that it's going on? They're giving us some quick and easy options, but I'm not sure that that's always the best thing to be doing.
Definitely agree with that. And I'll jump in for this one, actually, because Facebook have rolled out a new page experience. You might have seen this already. You might have changed your page, etc., of which comes with some upsides. But the reason I want to call this out because it has some downsides. So this is a bit of a kind of word to the wise, because there's been some bugs that have been reported in this. Because last month or the month before, we were talking about this new page experience, the fact that it would bring some new tools. So like a split news feed, so a special news feed just for like the business pages you follow, and also brings to life what they call professional profiles, meaning or business profiles, as they're going to call it, which means that we no longer have to use our own personal Facebook page to be an admin on company pages, which is nice. So we actually can get our personal life back if we want to. Sure, in the world of social, it's probably unlikely, but so that's the upside. But the downside is, as with so many things with Facebook, their mantra being move fast and break things. Unfortunately, that's not ideal when you're used by 50% of the world's population. So they broke loads of stuff. So there's loads of bugs with it where it's been reported where some people have upgraded, but they've lost previous content, lost their analytics, then had to downgrade again, and none of their content returned. There's been issues with other like advertising tools and third parties. Basically, it's not ready. So, if you can avoid upgrading, please do. And do this probably in the new year when Facebook have fixed the bugs. So that's just a word of caution on that one. So anyway, back onto more fun stuff. Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram. This is a really nice thing that I've spotted in stories, and the add yours, and this is picking out moments. You may see it if you swipe through stories. The one I'm particularly seeing at the moment is, where were you when COVID struck? People were sharing kind of holiday pictures and travel pictures, or what they were doing. So it's really nice if you see these in your stories, that then you can just click on it and get involved in the conversation as well. So it's a bit of kind of telling stories and a nice sticker to get to know people behind the scenes, to share your story as well with one click. I quite like this.
And it calls on your whole kind of collaborative thing you were talking about, increasing engagement, etc.
Yeah.
Oh, look.
Live stream shopping. We are in the season of live stream shopping. It is Black Friday tomorrow. All the sales have started already. So, but we're going to be seeing more of this. We have talked about this over the last couple of months. We've joked about, QVC presenting. If you are doing, have retail, people want to see these products. If people are buying online, they can't just buy off a static image. They want to see 4 or 5 images. They want to see the carousels. They want to see the product in situ and people using it. And what better way to do that than show it on a video as well. So if you've got online, you've got products, you've got to become a video presenter.
Basically, that's the advice. You heard it here first. Another thing about resharing content between platforms. So
again, they put things in, they take it away. We probably don't even notice this stuff until they go, oh, it's back. Just being able to share links across platforms. I'm often not a big fan of when I see something, in Twitter, like come and join this or go over here. It's kind of like, no, I'm on this platform and I'm already following you on here. So I'm always quite torn about this of, people trying to divert to other platforms, and if they're not sharing anything significantly different, why would I want to go and do that? But at the same time, if you want to build your audience on different platforms, you've got to do it. So this is a feature, not one I would probably be using, but it's there.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you're running like an Instagram live, for example, and you've got a Twitter audience, that's probably the ultimate time to use it, really, just to call people back in. At least like the link previews now don't look totally awful. So Twitter and Instagram have made friends.
Yeah. This is a nice one in terms of something that I've been working with clients a bit more of over recent months is accessibility. Accessibility of your social media posts, not just in terms of image clarity and fonts, but video. And we know the trend of audio this year. So text to speech and voice effects coming to Reels as well, captions, all of this stuff is really important. And if it's not been part of your content in 2021, I would certainly be looking at these features to add them in 2022. I will give a mention, it hasn't rose on Strictly, just hugely raised awareness of the deaf community and accessibility, and how we can all get involved in that. And we all have a responsibility to do that as well. So for me, this is one of those features and something that would just add to our levels of content, whether it's alt text, text to speech, captions, something we need to address.
Definitely right. Twitter.
I'm going to mention a news story here because we haven't mentioned it. I'm really pleased that Twitter usage has increased. I like Twitter. It is a news source. It's what's going on in the world. It gives you insight, gives you behind the scenes. Lush have announced this week that they are quitting social media platforms, that they are, coming off Facebook, they're coming off Instagram, but they've decided to stick to Twitter. And they haven't said why they're sticking to Twitter and why they would leave all the other platforms and not this one, or keep just one platform. So that for me is, I'd love to know the reason. If you can get them onto one of your webinars, Andy, next year, that would that's on my wish list to understand their thinking. But I'm glad that Twitter usage is increasing. They've put a lot of effort into new features this year. The opportunity to upgrade your profile to professional, which I've done, not seen any impact yet. But it's a valuable platform, and we shouldn't forget it. Profile search, making it easier to find people, to find accounts, to find topics. That's always a good thing, is making searching a lot easier. Shows the importance of your profile in terms of having a bio that tells people who you are, what you do, how to expect. And maybe this is linked to the professional switch profiles, because you get a couple of extra fields to put information in as well. So maybe that's why we've got a profile search option.
Yeah, and also like looking through, take Matt Navarra's profile here, looking through the content that he's produced as well. So it's a great way to research those accounts you might like admire or follow, and you might think, actually, what can we learn from them? Now you don't have to just scroll through a load of posts, you can actually search them.
Yeah. We love data, don't we? Anything, because Twitter analytics took away quite a lot of data a couple of years ago around the GDPR time, but I'm not sure it was all GDPR related. So, we got a bit more limited data from Twitter analytics, but I still think it shows a huge amount of information. So making it easier to use, easier to read, easier to understand, the data's there for us.
Definitely.
And then, not a surprise, everyone else is doing it. So Twitter, have got some new ad options over recent months around e-commerce. They're big on spaces, aren't they? So why not stick some live stream e-commerce in there as well? One to watch.
Exactly. They're launching a series of that over the upcoming weeks for obvious reasons, as are Pinterest and YouTube as well. So they're all getting in on the act.
They are.
Just
one quick one from LinkedIn. Briefly mentioned it before. More features this year, not loads of features, but more features. And this one is great if you're a freelancer contractor looking for work, is that there is the opportunity now, when you're editing your profile, to show what services you're open to, get feedback on your services. Great example here, Beth. I don't know if you're here today, but you're often on these sessions and have conversations as well. If you are freelancing, if you are looking for work, if you have recommendations for your services, make sure that you add some of these new features onto your LinkedIn profile.
And Beth, if you are on, then you came up first in my social media marketers. So well done.
Yeah, well done.
Cool. All right. Well, you go ahead and
I'll check the chat.
I'm going to fire through 6 or 7 minutes worth of updates across the other platforms that don't have as many updates. TikTok's growth continues. Forecast to hit 1.5 billion monthly active users. It was only 6 weeks ago that they hit 1 billion. So not at it yet, but they're growing at such a ridiculous clip that they're going to hit that by early 2022. Incredible. Luan already made reference to some of the ads and the new ad formats that are coming to TikTok. And we also showed some of the TikTok ad performance. They're getting more and more features and functionality every single month. So now they can do lead gen ads, and now you can pull through the leads that are generated. So if you're capturing emails, for example, through to your CRM as well. So TikTok started off with that advertising proposition being very much kind of brand awareness based, not much targeting, just, kind of pretty loose. whereas it's now getting much, much tighter and it's evolving very quickly. The TikTok Creative Exchange is another new feature which encourages collaboration between brands and creators. Definitely one worth checking out if you're thinking about getting into TikTok, but you're not too sure about what content you want to create. Working with creators can be a fantastic way to open up the opportunity of TikTok, and TikTok are fully aware of that, where actually, you know, I see the brand opportunity within TikTok, even though brand profiles are going to be coming next year. I'd probably see the better opportunity on TikTok is having, you know, personal profiles, but linked with really finding creators to work with to represent your brand voice. For me, I see that as the biggest opportunity on TikTok, with for most natural engagement rather than brand level engagement. YouTube rolls out something that is incredibly similar to TikTok's very well received For You page. They call it New to You. And obviously this is going to very much help with the whole YouTube Shorts thing, which is their TikTok competitor, which has rolled out to everyone now. New to You is a mix of people that you follow, but predominantly those that you don't. So really starting to serve content that it believes you might like. Whether the algorithm is going to be as good as TikTok, because they're just rolling this out at the moment, probably won't be, but just goes to show how much all of the platforms are looking at TikTok as the ways, as the kind of leading light in the social media industry in content discovery. Because let's not forget, last month TikTok overtook YouTube for the amount of time that people spend on the platform per month. So, you know, that's something that's got all of the platforms a little scared. YouTube have also followed suit with many platforms as well, removing the dislike count, which is always good. Dislike button is still there because it's still a signal to the algorithm as to whether the content's valuable or not. But ultimately, you know, helping us as creators feel less demoralized if we're seeing lots of down rates on our content. Hopefully, no one on this call would receive that anyway. Oh, look, YouTube live stream e-commerce. So once again, you didn't expect that one, did you? So once again, I don't need to talk too much about it. Same formats. I mean, to be honest, I've been surprised that YouTube have been so late to the party on this, because I think they got the biggest opportunity out of everyone, really, because it's very brand led anyway. Their advertising product is really well developed. Their targeting is really good. And of course, with like this live chat as we're seeing here, interacting through polls, being able to shop directly without leaving the live stream, this really is the utopia of what the social media platforms had envisaged in terms of monetization. And it's really this approach that's at some point, it won't happen next year, but maybe the year after that, where revenues gained through e-commerce approaches like this will outrank ads, which is going to be a very interesting change in dynamic for social in the future. So that's why this e-commerce underlying macro shift affects even B2B businesses that are not using social to sell, because fundamentally it's changing the dynamic of social. That's why it's a really interesting trend to watch. And I don't need to talk too much about this. Pinterest TV has launched as well, just in time for the holiday season. Yeah, Tom Daly has been one of the creators that they've used. He's got a knitting channel where he's selling knitting products through live streaming. So they've really invested heavily in creators as well in this. Once again, like with YouTube, Pinterest have a really, really good opportunity to capitalize on this. I feel much more buoyant about Pinterest and YouTube in their approaches here as opposed to Twitter, because I see that as a little bit counter to really where Twitter's strengths are personally. And the other thing that sits quite nicely into this e-commerce piece, and this is where Snapchat is very popular amongst a certain generation, the 18 to 24-year-olds in particular, where they use Snapchat to gain so much influence around products to buy through influencers they follow, and also through their augmented reality try-on lens. So this is an area that's getting developed a lot, and we'll see a lot more into 2022. So being able to try on the products and model them on yourselves without leaving the comfort of your sofa. So really that shopping experience becomes incredible, because now you get inspired about things and discover new stuff just through browsing social. You're able to just go ahead and try that on and make that purchase and continue scrolling. So, you know, it's amazing to see all of this playing out, and less amazing if you're potentially not that well regimented with saving money. So good for that. And finally, Clubhouse. There's actually been some good stuff from Clubhouse, actually. Fell off the radar a little bit. The growth is still much slower than it was. But finally, are feeling much more encouraged by some of the features that they've added. So link pinning to the top of rooms, very useful, because of course we're obviously talking about stuff and audio, and one of the hardest things with any audio content is that if we want to take someone elsewhere or reference something in the audio chat, what can you do? So link pinning is really, really useful. Clubhouse Replays, absolutely massive, right? So, and the way that they've done this is really good as well. So of course, most people watch on demand. As we all know, probably about somewhere between 50 to 70% of people will watch on demand. So what we've now got is the ability to record our audio stream, and then it still renders as that room, and people can go into that room to listen to it, can still look at the links and that kind of stuff. And also you'll get data on how many people have been in the room, listened to the replay, how much they listen to, etc. And all of that then starts to make Clubhouse much more powerful and actually a properly valuable tool for businesses going into 2022. The only thing that's kind of inhibiting me from saying, oh, everyone needs to get on it, is because I haven't seen very much in terms of the growth. So I'm still a little bit cautious on that. But also, you know, Luan perfectly articulated that point about accessibility earlier, so I don't need to reiterate that. But live captions, massively important. It's one of my favorite features when Twitter Spaces launched, because they launched with this. But Clubhouse are very much now on a par with the functionality of Twitter Spaces. So yeah, very interested to see what happens with audio into 2022. And with that now concludes many updates from today and also the previous 11 months, 10 months. Trends and themes, ads, performance, strategies, potentially not in alignment. So do we need to rethink of our advertising strategy? Should we test different formats? Should we test different platforms? TikTok, Insta Reels, for example. Now's an opportunity to start testing things and at least putting a little bit of budget and a little bit of time to experimentation. And then if we talk about organic reach and the decline of it, you know, we need to think about what we can do to potentially counter that. Either thinking about platforms with more generous organic reach to experiment with, so TikTok, LinkedIn being two of those in particular, and also thinking about the different content formats that can help you reverse the trend of a decline, which is obviously live streaming in this example, doing more carousels, for example, and then thinking about all of those other nuanced stuff about hashtag usage, etc. Social commerce, really clear. I've spoken about this already, driving social media direction. And as we'll continue to reiterate, going forward and beyond, social is going to be all about creators and community partnerships, because that's really where the influence is going to happen. I'd like to see a future. I see a future where it's far less reliant on ads, and it becomes much more, it being social becomes much more of a place where we have genuine connections through communities, and working with those communities and those creators, that's where we build the advocacy around our brands and our businesses. That's what I'd like to see as the future. Maybe wishful thinking, but we'll see how it plays out. What about you, Luan?
I think there's lots of key trends this year in terms of monetization, in terms of audio, in terms of social commerce, some small new features, Facebook and the metaverse. We haven't been short of things to talk about every month, even though we never know what's going to happen over the next few weeks once we've set the dates up. So I think there's always things to watch. Huge advocate of testing. We have to keep testing. You know, it's been a challenge, another challenging year where we've had to kind of react, be more reactive perhaps than proactive. But I think it's time to kind of get those testing agendas back now and just look at your own data, see what your own data is telling you.
Definitely.
In terms of the chat, we haven't got any questions. People do ask us about the presentation. We share the recording with you, so you can get a copy of the recording. We don't share the slide deck, but you do get the recording if you want to listen back to us. I love the fact in the chat we see similar names and faces, names and details every month. So thank you for keep coming back. Thank you for supporting each other and sharing your own examples in the chat as well, so that we don't need to do that, but you take care of that yourselves as we go through. So for me, it's really just a huge thank you to everyone that keeps showing up, listening to us and supporting each other in these chats, as well as listening to our debates each month as well.
Exactly. So is there anything that you'd like to share as well, Luan, before we close?
Before we close, I think a huge thank you to you, Andy, for kind of, hosting these and pulling these together. We're not going to have one in December. We are going to start again in January, and we will be back every month with you. What I'm going to be working on over the break and for the next few months, as well as my clients and training, is rewriting the second version of my book. If those of you that are connected with me, I did post about it last week. It's the fifth anniversary of me launching my book. We should share it here. Relax, it's only social media. So I am now working on version 2. Some of you volunteered. There's still spaces if you want to join me in terms of reviewing my book, helping me write version 2. But yeah, Andy, you said we're going to have a social media detox. We're not. Yeah. We're still sharing updates every week. We both have newsletters. Yeah. If something big happens, we'll probably jump back on and talk about it as well. For me, it's just, a huge thank you. And we will keep going with this if you want us to.
Yeah, we plan to continue into next year, so we'll be back. But one thing I've just shared there, in addition to Luan's book, as you know, I run weekly strategy sessions as well, so where we kind of take all of these learnings and make them into kind of practical actions, of which you'll find a link to that there. I'm running probably another 3, I think, for the rest of this year, and then they'll be back into the new year. But otherwise, thank you massively for everyone joining, so many people that come every single month. So thank you. You'll get the recording, all the follow-up, and a blog write-up of the kind of key takeaways as well. That'll be coming your way tomorrow, probably, very latest Monday. But otherwise, can we say,
Merry Christmas?
Can we say it? Can we say it? But yeah, all right. Yeah, thank you for all your support. Merry Christmas, even though it feels far too early, although the tree's going up this weekend. I'll see you again in the new year.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.